Everyone. Good morning. I like to start by taking refuge, so we can take refuge together if you'd like. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in Sangha. Well, thank you. Good morning. Thank you for inviting me to give a Dharma talk in your Sangha. I've never been to Nebraska, and I wasn't sure if you were in person because I heard of the Zoom Do, so I wasn't sure if you were actually meeting in person. And it's so delightful to see so many of you gathered together. I like to start my Dharma talk with refuge. It's part of the tradition from where I trained. Like was said, I trained at a monastery for 11 and a half years, Great Vow Zen Monastery in Clatskanie, Oregon. I now live in Portland. But this practice of taking refuge is an ancient practice in the Buddhist tradition. And my teacher, Chosen Roshi, would always say, we put the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha in the place of the small self and let them give the talk. So that's part of my intention in taking refuge, is just allowing the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, the three treasures, to be here with us, and for the talk to flow from that spirit. My teacher Chosen, she could be fierce at times, and her parting words to me as I left the monastery and moved to the city was, "It's not about you." So I think this phrase is part of the Dharma refuge, that we are interconnected with the ancestors if we open to it, with the teachings if we open to it, with the Buddha if we open to him, them, this, and just let ourselves be experienced as that interpermeating network of being itself. The stream of Dharma is alive here, is awake here. And that's so wonderful. So Myoreen or Tara emailed me a couple of weeks ago to ask about a theme for this talk. And she included this poetic, well, I read it as a poetic phrase. Her introduction phrase was about autumn there on the prairie, and it was raining that day. And I felt just like in reading those words, this like sinking back into myself, and just this kind of awe and blessing and wonder about the grace of this season, the grace to be practicing Dharma in the autumn. So I titled this talk, Unknowing Ourselves, the Practice of the Fallen Leaves. And I'd like to lean into the imagery of autumn, but also just the feeling sense of this time of year and this time of practice. The autonomal imagery is really woven into the teachings of the ancestors, maybe more than any other season, or maybe I just tend to read it that way because I really like the autumn, because you also see the spring is also talked about a lot. But I really resonate with the teachings of Hongzhi. So Hongzhi wrote the famous poems, Guidepost for Silent Illumination and Guidepost for the Hall of Pure Bliss. At the monastery where I trained, we chanted those chants every evening. So for evening service, I was just like reciting these words of Hongzhi that are so full of poetic imagery of the natural world, but especially like tuned into the season of autumn. My teachers really loved Hongzhi, so his teachings from Cultivating the Empty Field and from those two poems just like really have shaped, I think they're like woven deep into this heart mind of practice. So I feel like I carry that lineage just by being immersed so deeply in his teachings. And I want to share some of the passages from Cultivating the Empty Field. I don't know if you're familiar with that text. That's the translation by Taigen Leighton and Wu Yi that I'm familiar with, which is Hongzhi's practice instructions. And just as I recite, I'm just going to say a few lines, and lines that are kind of taken out of these longer practice instructions that invoke the feeling and sense of autumn, at least how Hongzhi was experiencing autumn. And I hope these images are familiar to you. They may be if you live in a place where autumn is happening. But also, of course, these images evoke the heart minds. They're very familiar and very intimate to a certain aspect of being that we come to know in Zazen practice and retreat practice, and then come to know more and more as our innate being itself. And so I'll read some of these lines, and you can just feel the image and let it work on you, let it permeate your heart minds. Vast and spacious, like sky and water merging during autumn. Vast and spacious, like sky and water merging during autumn. The place of silent and serene illumination is the heavenly dome in clear autumn, shining brightly without strain, gleaming through both light and shadow. The place of silent and serene illumination is the heavenly dome in clear autumn, shining brightly without strain, gleaming through both light and shadow. Clouds disperse and the winds die down. Autumn sky clears and the moon sets. Clouds disperse and winds die down. Autumn sky clears and the moon sets. Splendid and lustrous, like the waters moistening autumn. Noble like the moon overwhelming the darkness. From the beginning, just beam through all gloom, profoundly free from strain. Splendid and lustrous, like the waters moistening autumn. Noble like the moon overwhelming the darkness. From the beginning, just beam through all gloom, profoundly free from strain. A crane dreams in the wintry mists. Autumn waters flow far in the distance. A crane dreams in the wintry mists. Autumn waters flow far in the distance. So those are teachings from Hongzhi. And while each season has its particular practice, flavor, insight, and teaching, autumn seems like a particularly potent time of year for Zen practice. When I first moved to Great Vow, it was summer. They have this summer training program where at the time I moved there, which was 12 years ago, it was free. So it attracted a lot of young people. It still attracts a lot of young people. And I was probably 24 when I went. And it was like, it's a 4 to 8 week period of residential immersion in the monastic experience. And while I really fell in love with the place and the teachings and the practice of Zen Buddhism as embodied at the monastery, it was summer, and it was like summer camp. And a part of me like yearned to be there through all of the seasons, just to experience what it would be like to be there for all of the seasons. And I had the opportunity to actually make a year commitment at that time and experience all the seasons of practice. And then we went into autumn. And in the Zen community of Oregon, autumn is our Ongo practice period. Ongo literally translates as peaceful dwelling, but has come to signify a time of intensified practice. So what that looked like at the monastery was more hours on the cushion, waking up early, like waking up pre-dawn, sitting in the dark. We'd be chanting and the sun would start to come up. By breakfast, we would get like a little bit of light. More longer retreats, as well as study and body practice. And at Great Vow, the flavor of autumn is like everything that those lines by Hungr evoke. The mists rest in the valley, there's goldening trees, sky and water seems to merge. Wild geese call out from the river, continually welcoming us home. The forest awakens in vibrant colors that support this inward turning of Zazen practice. At the monastery, it could feel like, oh, autumn is practicing us. And if you're open to it, you can kind of merge with this continuous activity, brightening into the expanse of the autumn waters and skies and colorful trees. And though I'm no longer a monastic and now live in the city, I feel similar that this time of year is practicing me, that autumn is practicing me. Maybe in ways that my monastic self couldn't imagine. And then I like to imagine that also maybe in ways that Hungr himself couldn't imagine, like how we too can be practiced by autumn, living very different lives than Hungr. The last 30 years of his life, he basically stayed in his mountain monastery, like didn't even venture down into the towns. He did live like a life of relative pilgrimage before that, but for the last 30 years of his life, when he was abbot at the monastery, he stayed in mountain retreat. And that's where these writings come from. So now my autumn encompasses a darkening earth, fruits that are ripening, Halloween decorations that deck the yards, porches, and patios of my neighbors' homes. And I feel this inward pull to clarify, to look into the shadowy elements that emerge as I spend more time alone with myself. I feel the tug more clearly of the Bodhisattva vow to awaken, to clarify this heart mind, to practice a deep and sustaining compassion. And I feel, and this isn't always something I feel, but I feel it particularly at this time of year. The words of Dogen Zenji, and then my teacher Chosen would also say these words, that beyond this, there is still more to see. That practice continues to open up and evolve. And there's always like more we can integrate and deepen into. So I'd like to take a moment and allow you to reflect on how autumn might be practicing you. And if you would use your own images to describe this season of practice, what would they be? And just for a moment now, reflect, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, but I want to give you just an opportunity to start turning your mind towards this season and how you're being practiced, and the images that maybe like from the natural world, maybe from your just everyday life, that are evocative of this time of year, this season of practice for you. And also think about how are they similar to Hongzhi's images and how are they different? I'd like to take a moment and share some of mine. This is me, not Hongzhi. It will be quite obvious. Leaves blaze crimson. Leaves blaze crimson, golden, and orange. Where am I practicing holding fast? And where am I being asked to let go? Shedding the activity of summer, I turn toward the essence. Cool outside, a fire burns in this inner hearth. Shades of nakedness, how beautiful, people remark, to a slender gum tree with handfuls of scarlet leaves gracing its central axis. It takes time. It takes time to unburden those thoughts so close, so familiar, I don't even notice them. What would it be like to take off this language clothing and dwell in my deep unknowing? Their bodies rest in small piles on sidewalk and street corners. One of my teenage clients shares that the sound of them crunching is one of his favorite seasonal coping strategies. I gather 5 yellow ones for my altar, my earth altar. Another day, I gather 5 reds for our Siddiqui altar at the temple. I have a friend who presses them in books, another who uses them in ceremony. The rest get crunched, blown, or composted. What do you do with your losses, with our collective losses? How do you honor the changes in your own life? Vibrance, the autumn rains bring life to the forest, where everyone seems to support everyone else. Together with this forest, I cradle loss and make room for the harvest. A severed head stares, a cobweb blows, and a family of skeletons converse on the patio. The hungry heart, so full of longing, finds its way out of the shadows and is offered a treat, a place at the table, a taste of compassion and understanding. Perhaps here, Hongzhi's sensibilities meet the realities of lay life in the city. Here, the images of autumn include, and maybe must include, it all. The vast sky embracing here houselessness, personal grief, the teens from work, the climate crisis, friendships, election season, budding opportunities, a friend's cancer, another friend's new baby, people trying to get by, broken glass, a bag of poo. Both expressions, Hongzhi's monastic expression and this city lay life expression, equally dharma. If form is emptiness and emptiness form. Yet perhaps lay life offers more opportunities to do this dance continuously of personal, impersonal, conditioned, unconditioned, form, emptiness. As practitioners who wear many roles and move in and out of retreat, formal zazen, temple practice, our zazen is vast and timeless. Our practice is so particular, as was Hongzhi's and all of the ancestors. To live a human life, our zazen is vast and timeless, our lives so particular. And so we get to witness and affirm these two, what do you call them, dimensions of practice, this side of spiritual maturation and this side of always whole, complete in and of itself. My teacher, Hogan Roshi, would always say, there is no shortcut to spiritual maturation. And he would say it in a way that it seemed to cause him great strife, or maybe just an acceptance of the nature of the human life. Spiritual maturity, the way we talked about it at the monastery, is the way we meet the stuff of our lives. And although this is not a very Zen word, I think of it as soul work. And soul work is very particular. It includes how we show up with our coworkers, at our jobs, in our creative projects, with the people that we run into and move with throughout our day, the conflicts we find ourselves in, the parts of us who are healing, our anger, guilt, shame, loves, and joys. Soul work is embodied dharma practice. It includes how we inhabit this body in this world, when we are alone and when we are with others. It is the particular conditioning and experiences we have and face. Spiritual maturation or soul work needs other people. It needs tensions, for we mature or our soul deepens through meeting challenges both internally and externally. Noticing the places in our lives where our bodies and hearts tense up or pull back or react out of fear or contract in some way. These are the edge places, the places where we can grow and learn if we're willing to stay in that tension, or at least to return to it again and again and again and again. And then there's the side, and maybe it's not fair to call it a side. It's more like the ground or the foundation of our being, which, to quote Hongzhi again, vast and spacious, like sky and water merging during autumn. Our essence, utter completeness, unconditioned wholeness, the light that radiates from everyone and everything equally, where there are no conflicts, no sides, no better, no worse, no edges, no learning, no growth. A place of silence and serene illumination is the heavenly dome in clear autumn, shining brightly without strain, gleaming through both light and shadow. Bodhidharma says, keep your mind on the sublime and let your body change with the seasons. I love this quote, for it invokes in me the inseparability of body and mind, conditioned and unconditioned, relative and absolute. I see this colorful body in constant motion, moving through the seasons of the year. At one time, the crimson leaves, at another, basking in the sun, another time, playing in the rain, and then moving through the snowfields. Muman says in his capping verse to case 19 in the Mumonkan, ordinary mind is the way. Hundreds of flowers in spring, the moon in autumn, a cool breeze in summer, the snow in winter. If there is no vain cloud in your mind, for you, it is a good season. I feel these seasons in my body and how our bodies are part of our conditioning, part of our particular fingerprint expression in the world, our particular karma that we get to learn to embrace and work with. Our bodies are involved in our soul maturation, in how we come to know and heal and transform ourselves, our relationships, our communities, this world. And this changing body, changing season is part of it. The other part is what Bodhidharma calls the sublime. If mind's nature is vast and boundless, attending to this, we unknow ourselves as limited and allow ourselves to open to the mystery that we are prior to experience, prior to body. In Zen practice, we practice waking up to ourselves. We sit zazen, taking that backward step out of identification with that tangle of thoughts and into the stillness, the spaciousness, the silence of awareness itself. Our awareness is sky-like, open, knowing presence. We unknow ourselves as being in linear time. We unknow the narrative self with its to-do lists and stories of who we are and who we are not. We unknow our conditioned patterns and allow the play of mind to liberate itself, the play of body to liberate itself. How long does a single thought last? What is it made of? Can you see its light? The freedom of mind's nature is the compassion of the ancestors, our face before the world was made. And it's inseparable from the soul work. And yet we talk about them separately because to talk about them all at once is one, impossible. When one side is realized, the other side is dark, as Dogen Zenji says. But also when we try to talk about them as one thing, we end up emphasizing one side or the other and prioritizing perhaps one side over the other. Or saying, well, it's all dharma, so I don't have to do anything. I don't need to do zazen. This is zazen. This is zazen. That is zazen. So for lack of force, in the face of skillful means, using skillful means, we talk about them separate, but they're inseparable. The long road of maturation that happens in time is completely happening in our Buddha mind. And this long road of maturation that happens in time, that happens in this body and mind, in this conditioning, also demands a fair degree of unknowing. For the seasons are in motion. Our bodies change with them. We cycle through these periods of growth, expansion, expression, loss, death, and rebirth. If we enter these with awareness, soul deepens, we mature. We shed and are born again, moment by moment, season by season, challenge by challenge. My teacher, Hogen Roshi, said to me early on in practice when I was struggling a lot with habit energy of comparison, distraction, and zazen, feeling like I had to work harder than everyone else, which is a long sort of habit pattern from my family. He said, if you are aware, you can learn from any situation. If you are aware, you can learn from any situation. And also, and this isn't his quote, this is my contemplation years and years later. If you are aware, you are aware. There is incredible freedom and compassion in this vast network of possibility that we are. If you are aware, you can learn from any situation. If you are aware that you are aware, there is incredible freedom and compassion in this vast network of possibility that we are. So I want to pause there and ask you how autumn is supporting your practice. What images reveal the work of maturation that you're engaged in? And how do you keep your mind on the sublime and let your body change with the seasons? Questions are such a big part of my tradition. My Zumi Roshi, it's where my lineage is traced back through. Um, I think someone counted that over 50% of his book, Appreciate Your Life, is questions. And apparently that's how he gave Dharma talks, was he'd just present a koan and then ask a series of questions. So questions have been handed down to us through my Zumi Roshi, through his teachers. And I think it's just a very potent way of opening up the inquiry that's possible in a Zen practice. So those are my questions to you, and I'm happy to engage in dialogue about whatever you'd like to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you. The floor is open. Tara, you want to start? I will.
Apparently, I'm being called on. Good morning, Kisei. Thank you so much for your beautiful and evocative Dharma talk this morning. I'm Yoren, so we've sort of met over the
Yes.
Welcome to the Zoom though. I do love autumn imagery, and I think it's just ripe with just the sort of fundamentals of what I think our practice is about. And I always lean on the metaphor of letting go, right? Because this time of year, the leaves are dropping, the trees are letting go of them. And I try to learn from that. It seems like a lot of wisdom. And as you were talking today, I was thinking about the fact that it seems like I live the seasons, all of them, every day. It's almost like the leaves regrow, they get really brilliant, I get attached to them, I don't want them to go. But if I want to see the sky, I have to. So that's what came up for me. And just the sense of, in a way, the practice is tireless. You just keep experiencing those seasons over and over.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
This is Pam, and I'll kind of riff off of that too. Autumn is my favorite season, and I think from a practice perspective, it's the season that most perfectly merges the two sides of things. So it's a gorgeous season. The light is, the best light of the year. And at the same time, it's a season of, that confronts you with death. So it's particularly from the urban suburban perspective, I appreciated your distinction, in the poets, because I think of somebody like David Budbill, for example, modern poet. He lives in nature, or did. I don't know if he's still around. And you see so much attention to the natural world there because they're so surrounded by it. And then in the urban suburban environment, we're surrounded by so much else that there's much less devoted attention to the natural world. And autumn and spring, as seasons of change, tend to shake us out of that. They call us to notice, what's happening in the world and the change that's happening. The difference to me between spring and autumn is that in autumn, just the browning of the green, the falling of the leaves, but also its association with holidays like Halloween and the Day of the Dead. It's just like it brings you to confront death. And I always describe my feeling of this season as bittersweet. It's a merging of, these these, you know, appreciation of beauty, appreciation of loss and death at the same time, all merged into one.
Mm. Yeah, thank you.
Good morning, Benji here. Thank you very much. Very poetic. I attribute like autumn. It's like the romantic season for me. It's like the most romantic, and I guess it's sort of grounding for me. I don't know. The sun goes down earlier. It starts to get cold. So, and the cold and the temperature change kind of, I think, in the past it has like catalyzed me. Is that a word?
Yes.
It's like catalyzed me into like kind of like, okay, this is it. You know, it's time. Like it brings me to the moment a little bit more. The cold does, or extreme weather, and there's a sense, like Pam was saying, like a bittersweet sense where I feel alone sometimes, but you know, with the holidays and stuff, it makes me feel kind of connected. But yeah, that's it for me. It's my piece.
Thank you, Benji.
Anyone else?
Very good. Thank you very much for that. It was beautiful, and particularly the image of the sky and the water becoming one. What comes up for me in autumn is the change in the morning and evening meditation. That just because of its timing here, we move from summer when we get up for our morning meditation and it's already bright, and when we do evening meditation, it's still bright. And at this time of the year, they both move to darkness. So you mentioned in another beautiful image, meditating in the dark. And there's something beautiful about sitting here at 6 o'clock in the morning when it's dark, and you just want to turn off all the lights in the dark and let the sun come up. And then an evening meditation between 6 and 7, it goes down. So that's what comes up for me in autumn, a sense of being close to the rhythm of the day and the rhythm of the seasons in a place that I moved to and has an extremity of climate I didn't grow up with, but is beautiful because of that extremity.
Yeah, thank you. There's something about that, like waking up before human activity, like and sitting in the dark and it's still quiet and like the birds aren't even making sounds yet and then they start to come out. There's something about being awake for that transition that's just always been moving for me. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sarah. What was that line that it was a profound, profound and strain, a profound, like that was in the poem.
Which poem?
The poem that you recited. Profound freedom of strain, or free of strain, or something like that. And when you said it, like it, and you had also said, like Pam, how fall is like really bittersweet. Like just the idea of a profound lack of strain is also kind of bittersweet, because I mean, the way that it hit me, it's like, wow, I wonder what that's like. Like, and I don't know, I see an analogy in the season where everything is, it's effortlessly, everything's changing, and it does like have to do with death, like, you know, a precursor to a kind of death, but it's not actually a death, it's just change. It's a profound change, and nature is doing it effortlessly, free of strain. And I just sort of feel like as much as we are able, if we can match that energy, that would be a benefit to us and like everyone around us. And but it's also really bittersweet too, because it's not easy to do that. Like we have so much conditioning and so we're so busy and like, but yeah, so that's that line in particular, and then what everybody else was saying was kind of what was evoked in me.
Thank you. Yeah, it's from the beginning, just beam through all gloom, profoundly free from strain.
Profoundly free from strain.
Yeah. And he evokes these, like, the moon just overwhelms the darkness without even trying. It just comes up, and that's what happened. And that, like our awareness, the light of our awareness, has the power to do that, but we often just kind of get in the way. Like you were saying, like that effortlessness is part of zazen, and also because we're human, it involves a lot of effort sometimes. Thank you.
Any other thoughts? Well, thank you so much. It was a beautiful talk. We really appreciate it. We're going to do a closing chant, and then I have a number of announcements, and then we'll go off for tea and conversation, and I wish you could join us, but you can't.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It was wonderful to meet you all and to be able to participate in this, your Sunday program.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The many beings are numberless, bowing to carry them across.
The many beings are numberless, bowing to carry them across.
Greed, anger, and ignorance rise endlessly, bowing to cut off the mind road.
Greed, anger, and ignorance rise endlessly, bowing to cut off the mind road.
Dharma gates are countless, bowing to wake to them all.
Dharma gates are countless, bowing to wake to them all.
Buddha's way is all embracing, bowing